So have you ever tried to do a portrait and you were like, how am I going to do it for my friend? Because sometimes you're going to do a portrait for a very good friend of yours. My best friend, he commissioned me to do a wedding portrait for him for his 10-year wedding anniversary. It was going to be his Christmas present for his wife. And I was like, yeah, I'll do it if the price is right. So I'm using a 24 by 30 inch canvas, usually the ones that I buy from Michael's. I buy those for most of my paintings because it's pretty good size, unless somebody asks me to do something different. Anyways, I am underpainting, like I always do, with acrylic paints. I use brown and gray, burnt umber to be exact, with a brown color. And I add a little bit of white to keep it diluted in a lighter shade. And of course, I wait a half hour for the acrylic paint to dry because it dries relatively fast and I want to get as much done as possible. So I establish that 4x4 grid to match the reference photograph. And then I begin the blocking in process. Blocking in, I just add the main shapes and colors on there without worrying too much about the rest of the infrastructure of the painting. I just add a lot of like basic colors on there, basic, more grayish tones before I move on to any more of the refined, more vivid colors. And you can also see in the background with the sun, the sunset, along with the surrounding sky around it, the colors are very diluted. It doesn't seem that way because the way that they push each other out, because they are, after all, complementary colors, but they are pretty diluted. I add a lot of gray onto the blue and some complementary colors for the orange color. So actually it's not as vivid as it seems. And so I continue to block in the process with the rest of the painting. I do a lot of basic foundational colors. I take a look at spreading the paint around. I'm not as concerned about adding layers yet, but I'm just more concerned about spreading the paint onto the rest of the blockage, the blocking in. And if you saw my other video of the 4 stages of painting, this would be the second stage of the painting. I'm blocking in, I'm measuring in the parts onto the grid because I use this 4x4 grid a lot, very intensively in this beginning stage of the painting. Like I do a lot of measuring, not with a ruler necessarily, but just with my eyes. I kind of guesstimate where the shapes and colors are going to lie between those reference dots and the reference lines. Like, is that line or is that edge going to be like 2/3 the distance, or like 1/3, or halfway, or somewhere in between? So I use that type of mental gauging with that, and it helps a lot with those reference dots. So I use a lot of shading at this point, a lot of layering, a lot of shading. But that's the thing, like when you paint something, you think you're going to have it organized, you think you have this organization, like with how you're going to add on everything, but then once you start painting, a lot of that kind of goes out the window. You're planning, you kind of start to improvise, kind of doing this impromptu method. Or maybe it's just me. Maybe I've just been doing this for such a long time that I just kind of like improvise. But then again, though, I think a lot of artists, once they plan a painting out, once they plan how they're going to do it step by step, you kind of deviate from that a lot. You jump around a lot. Like sometimes you're going to be doing a lot of measuring and blocking in and guessing where the shapes and colors are going to be. And then other points, you're going to be doing some more refining work. You're going to have places where you're going to be shading, doing the shading, the fine detailing. And so that's what I found myself doing. Like I found myself doing a lot of going back and forth with the fine detail, the fine refining, and then other sections of the painting, I found myself doing some more of the basic components of them. So it's good to have a plan, but just don't be surprised if you do jump around from step to step. It's not a bad thing. It's just sometimes the way it is. I mean, a lot of plans, they backfire, and that's like with other stuff outside of painting too, like business and other things. I mean, not everything goes according to plan. It's not a rigid structure. And of course, in this creative field as art and music, I mean, that should be very not surprising that stuff doesn't go according to plan. But I do think that I'm a mechanical type of painter. I do use a lot of measuring, a lot of things that involve accuracy. But anyways, back to the painting. I mean, it speaks for itself. A lot of the shading, I do a lot of edge blending. I do a lot of color mixing on the canvas, and so when I add the layers on there, I wait until the paint dries, and then I add another small layer. Like on the faces, you see that I got the shades, the lights pretty well established at this point, but that's because I went back and forth. I added a layer, and then I waited a day or two till the paint dried, and then I went back to add a second, third, or even fourth layer of shades and light on the skin tones, because that way it helps really make the colors more firm. And in my other video, in my 4 stages of painting, I talk all about that, about the layering and how important it is, especially if you want to deviate from the underpainting. The underpainting helps anchor in a lot of the colors. So if you have a thin layer of paint, the colors are going to be a lot more unified by the underpainting. But if you want to have the colors escape the gravity of the underpainting, that's when you add a lot of layers on there in specific areas. So that way those areas will kind of escape the gravity of it and really show out a lot more. Like the faces. I mean, I add a lot of layers in the faces, and they really kind of stand out a lot more from the background because they have more layers on them. And when it comes to the colors, I don't stick with one color. For the flesh tones, I'm using burnt sienna. For the brown, I'm using white. I'm also using a little bit of red, and I'm also using the burnt umber. So I'm using those 4 colors primarily. And I mix them interchangeably because if you have a diverse array of colors, they're going to have a lot more realistic outlook on there. And so, for example, I would have one small thin layer of white and burnt sienna with a little bit of red, and then to diversify that layer, I would slightly deviate that flesh tone with a lighter brown color. And when you're adding these thinner films of layers on top of each other, the magic happens is when you could still somewhat see through that layer to the preceding layer, and you're going to be able to see a little bit of that variation of color. So that's the secret of painting portraits, as far as I'm aware, with all the masters historically. I mean, I know that it's important to have those layers with the variety. So it's like variety plus layers equals realistic skin tones, as far as I'm concerned. So for the most part, the faces should be done by now, but the background, it was pretty easy. Just pretty classical landscape thing that I did, like I always do, with some clouds, a lot of light, airy type of colors. Like I did a little bit of wet on wet on there because it makes it so much easier. Because if you wait for the blue sky to dry up and then you add clouds, it's going to make it more complex because you have to blend the edges of the clouds with the rest of the background color, which is the sky. And you're just going to make it more difficult on yourself because you got to reapply that blue paint to match the already blue paint that you have on there. So it just makes it more of a pain. So it's just so much easier to kill two birds with one stone and just have the colors already wet. The blue background for the sky and the clouds on there. So it's just so much easier to blend the edges on there. So yeah, like when it comes to edge blending, it's so much easier to have the paint wet on there already because just to mix it on there, it just makes it so much easier. But at this point, I'm almost done with the painting. I'm adding the background, just the final seascape and the final edges of the clouds and palm trees. I want the background to be nice, you know, I have like this nice tropical background, but at the same time, I don't want it to steal the show from the feature attraction, which of course is the married couple. And I made sure that the layers of color for the portraiture stands out a lot more. So I actually used several more layers of paint for the portrait for the people as opposed to the background, which I kind of left looking a little more flat, but I did that on purpose because I wanted it to be more on the back burner than anything else. And so right now I'm finally going over the reference dots. I'm erasing them, I'm painting over them, and voila, you got yourself a portrait. So I wait 4 days for the paint to completely dry, and then I have that moment of truth, the presentation, when I go to their house and present it to them, and hopefully they like it. So yeah, I hope that you learned a thing or two with this quick video of my portrait painting. So please smash that thumbs up and leave a comment below if you have anything to say. And stay tuned to my other videos. So thank you for watching.